I didn't set out to break their index. The Veshtari altitude index was 912 years old when I arrived on Korath 3 for the Joint Geological Survey. 912 years of atmospheric cartography. Every altitude band from sea level to what they called the absolute ceiling, classified, measured, and codified into law. Not just science, law, their building codes, their aviation corridors, their territorial boundaries, all of it referenced the index the way we reference sea level. It was the thing they never questioned, because it had never needed questioning. The ceiling sat at 12,211 meters. Above that line, the index read Class 0. No atmosphere, hard vacuum. Biological exposure fatal. Survey prohibited. Nobody had ever gone above it. Not in 912 years. Not once. I should say what the Veshtari are, because it matters. They are cartographers. Not as a profession, as a species. They map, they measure, they classify. Their children learned the index the way ours learned to count. Every citizen can recite the atmospheric composition at any altitude band from memory. Nitrogen analog percentages, pressure gradients, thermal lapse rates, wind corridors. They trust their instruments absolutely, and their instruments have earned that trust across nearly a millennium. The Northern Escarpment is the tallest geological formation on Korath 3. It rises from a wide basalt plain at 4,600 meters to a summit the Veshtari have never surveyed, because the summit is above 12,211. Their topographic maps show the escarpment's contour line stopping cleanly at the ceiling, like a drawing that runs off the edge of the page. Above that line, blank, white, unmapped. I was assigned to the survey team as the human geological liaison, one Marine with a rock hammer, a sampling kit, and 20 years of alpine fieldwork. My job was to compare Veshtari mineral classifications against Terran basalt family standards and flag discrepancies. Straightforward work. I spent the first 11 days at base camp running thin section analysis on core samples the Veshtari brought down from the lower face. On the 12th morning I looked up. There were clouds above the ceiling. Not haze, not thermal shimmer. Clouds, thin, high, ice crystal cirrus clouds, sitting at what I estimated to be 13,000 meters, backlit by the twin stars, and throwing faint parallel shadows across the upper face of the escarpment. Clouds need atmosphere. They need moisture, temperature differential, and pressure. You cannot have clouds in a vacuum. I mentioned it to senior cartographer Ocean Dre over the sampling table. I pointed. She looked up, looked at me, and said the Veshtari word that translates loosely as atmospheric residual optical artifact. I asked what that meant. She said it meant the index classifies phenomena above the ceiling as non-atmospheric in origin. I asked if anyone had ever gone up to check. She said there was nothing to check. The index had never been revised. I let it go for 2 days. On the 14th morning, the clouds were still there. I requested permission to climb the upper escarpment for geological sampling. Ocean Dre approved the ascent to 12,200 meters, 11 meters below the ceiling, noting that no atmospheric sampling was authorized, only rock collection. I said that was fine. I packed my standard kit: hammer, chisels, sample bags, a 20-meter coil of 9mm static rope, a rack of steel pitons, a handheld barometric altimeter, and a field radio. I started climbing at 0600 under clear twin-star daylight. The basalt was excellent, dense, columnar, well-fractured along clean joint planes. Good climbing rock. I placed protection every 40 meters and clipped in, the way you do on any long alpine route. The air was thin but breathable, wind steady from the northwest at 12 knots. At 0914 my altimeter read 12,211. I kept climbing. There was no barrier, no membrane, no transition. The air at 12,212 meters was identical to the air at 12,210. Thin, cold, and entirely present. My lungs filled, my breath fogged. The barometric pressure on my altimeter dropped at the same steady gradient it had been following since 9,000 meters. Nothing changed except the number. I didn't radio down. I didn't make a note. I placed a piton in a clean horizontal crack, clipped my rope through it, and kept going. At 13,000 meters, the basalt shifted from dark gray to a banded gray-green I hadn't seen in any of the Veshtari's mineral catalogs. I chipped a sample and bagged it. The air was thinner now. I was breathing hard on the steeper pitches, but it was air. Unmistakably air. I could feel it on the sweat drying across my forearms. At 13,800 meters, I passed through the cirrus layer. The ice crystals caught the twin star light and broke it into a pale prismatic haze that lasted about 40 vertical meters. Above it, the sky was a deep violet I have never seen on any world before or since. Below, through the cloud, the Veshtari base camp was a cluster of white squares on the basalt plain. At 14,100 meters, I found a clean vertical seam in a column of dark, dense basalt, the finest grained rock on the entire face, almost black, with a glassy fracture surface that rang like ceramic when I tapped it with my hammer. I set a piton, 3 blows to seat it, 4 more to drive it flush. It rang true, solid. I unclipped my radio and pressed transmit. "Good anchor rock," I said. There was a pause. Then Ocean Dre's voice, very controlled. "Ren, confirm your altitude reading." 14100, I said. "Barometric, steady." Another pause. Longer this time. "Ren, the index reads class 0 above 12211. No atmosphere. You should not be breathing." "Copy," I said. "I'm breathing." I could hear voices behind hers. Other cartographers, speaking quickly in Veshtari. I caught fragments. Instrument error. Calibration fault. Residual artifact. The same language Ocean Dre had used about the clouds. The language of a system that had never been wrong meeting a fact it could not classify. I didn't argue. I clipped a sample bag to the piton, chipped 3 fragments of the black basalt, sealed the bag, and marked it with my grease pencil. 14,100 meters / basalt, atmosphere present. Then I looked up. The summit was another 400 meters above me, maybe less. The sky was the color of a bruise turning violet. The twin stars sat side by side at 40 degrees above the horizon, close enough together to cast 2 faint shadows from my hand on the rock face. I considered going higher. I had rope, I had pitons, the rock was good. But I was alone, and the air was thin, and I have been climbing long enough to know when the mountain has given you what it is going to give. The piton was set. The sample was bagged. The barometric reading was logged. That was enough. I descended the same route, pulling protection as I went. At 12,211 meters, I paused and looked at the ceiling, the altitude where the world was supposed to end. There was nothing there, just rock and air and the same steady wind. I reached base camp at 1740. Ocean Dre was standing at the sampling table with 4 senior cartographers and a portable atmospheric relay station they had assembled while I was on the face. They had been tracking my barometric telemetry since 12,500 meters. They had the full pressure curve on a readout strip 3 meters long, unspooled across the table and weighted at both ends with rock samples. The curve did not flatten at 12,211. It did not drop to 0. It continued, a smooth, steady, predictable gradient, all the way to 14,100, where it ended, at the last telemetry ping before I started descending. Ocean Dre looked at the curve for a long time. Then she looked at me. "The index has never been revised," she said. "I know," I said. She picked up a stylus and pulled a blank cartographic entry form from the stack beside the relay station. I watched her fill it in by hand. It took her 11 minutes. When she was finished, she read it aloud to the 4 senior cartographers, who each countersigned it. The entry read, "Altitude Index Revision 001, effective immediately. Prior classification, Class 0, no atmosphere, above 12,211 meters. Revised classification, Class 3, thin breathable atmosphere, survey permitted, to minimum 14,100 meters. Upper boundary, undetermined. Source, field observation, human geological survey liaison, barometric telemetry, and direct respiration. Method of confirmation, steel piton, hand-driven, set at 14,100 meters. Atmospheric presence confirmed, by continuous exhalation, condensation visible, on piton surface upon seating. Revision 001, the first in 912 years. I asked Ocean Dre what would happen next. She said a full atmospheric survey team would ascend to the piton and begin mapping from there. I asked if she wanted me to pull the piton before they went up. She said no. She said the piton was now the survey's origin marker, the fixed point from which every new measurement above the old ceiling would be referenced. I never climbed the escarpment again. I finished my 11 remaining days of mineral sampling at base camp, packed my kit, and caught the shuttle home. The piton is still there. A standard 15-centimeter hardened steel lost arrow piton, driven flush into black basalt at 14,100 meters, with a carabiner and a frayed loop of 9mm static rope still clipped through the eye. The Veshtari Survey Authority has since mapped the atmosphere to 16,340 meters and they are still going. Every measurement references my piton. Their revised grid lists it as origin marker 001. The formal entry in the index still reads method of confirmation, steel piton, hand-driven. I have always liked that. Not a satellite, not a sensor array, not 900 years of instruments. A steel piton and a man who kept climbing because the rock was good and the air was still there.